All right. All right.
So good that you'll be glad you decided to smile. Take out a pleasant outlook, pick out that noble grin. No, stick out the noble chin. Wipe that full of doubt look, and snap on that happy grin. And spread sunshine all over the place. Everybody! It's not your style. You look so good that you'll be glad you decided to smile. Pick out a pleasant outlook, stick out that noble chin. Wipe off that full of doubt look, and slap on that happy grin. And spread sunshine all over the place. Just
All right, Bob. There you go.
All right, here's one for Jesse.
blank here. How many people know that? Yeah, did you play that when you were a kid? I sure did. My knuckles are getting too big. That's the pentatonic. That's the pentatonic scale. With all the black keys are just pentatonic. It's five-note scale. And my uncle Hal, who was a very talented skydiver, but he also played the piano with a lot of heart. And he used to play everything on the black keys. I mean, essentially, he played on the black keys. I mean, he grabbed some white ones in the interim, but he managed to really get over by just playing. He pretended, and he did pretty well. And it always reminds me, like I was practicing with my son in the I was going to say in the yard, in the living room. He's playing on the rug with all his cars and his Legos and everything, trains, and had his whole little routine going on. I'm over there wailing. I'm doing my thing, practicing, doing my Chopin. And he comes over and he says, "Daddy, could you keep it down? I can't hear my pretending." That was the punchline. Anyway, I forgot where I was. My uncle. Anyway, so he used to play like Danny Boy. He'd play. Sounds like Danny Boy. All the black keys. I just thought that was interesting. So for those of you who are the creative types that like to go and play around on the piano, music's for everybody. Have fun with it. Enough lecturing. What am I playing? I don't know. I played everything in 4 so far, so I'm going to try a different time signature. And I know Jesse, or maybe it just was filtered, through the flagpole that you wanted to do some Cole Porters, or that you like Cole Porter. And I love it. Who doesn't love Cole Porter, right? Yeah. It's like the evergreens of evergreens. So I'm going to try one in 7. The time feel of 7, which I think is a great time signature, because if you're in a relationship with somebody who, let's say, claps on 2 and 4, and you clap on 1 and 3. If you play an odd meter, if you play on the 1, 2 together, eventually you're gonna be on the downbeat together if you're in an odd meter. So it kind of brings the poles together. So anyway, I'm gonna do a little From This Moment On by Cole Porter.
are shaking. I went out of my comfort zone. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Any other requests? Oh, here's another one. A great song that I heard through the grapevine. That, I'm sure you played this one. Boogie Drum. Okay. Does anybody know what a contrafact is?
The what?
Contrafact. Contrafact is, in a musical sense, a contrafact, when applied to lyrics, it's lyrics written or made up to an already written song. You know, you just change the words. You know, in more musical nuts and bolts terms in music theory, it's when you take a set of chord changes from a song and you use that as a template for a new melody. So contrafact melodies were really prevalent at the advent of bebop, when I think a lot of guys just didn't want to pay the royalties. But they started writing heads to popular songs, like, for instance, another Cole Porter, great Cole Porter song. What is this thing called love? What is this thing called love? This funny thing called love. Who can solve its mystery? How did it make a fool of me? I saw you there one wonderful day. You took my heart, there's that lick again, and threw it away. That's why I asked the Lord in heaven above, what is this thing? Okay, so then Dizzy Gillespie came along, or was it Bird? It was one of those two guys. In fact, I'm going to shift up a few generations after them. Let's go with Lee Konitz. Does anybody know who Lee Konitz is? He was very much influenced by Charlie Parker and Lenny Tristano, of course, and all these great musicians of the bebop era. I know this isn't a bebop show, but I'm laying something on you.
Take it.
So anyway, I thought Lee came up with a very, very clever melody for what is this thing called love, and he called it Subconscious Lee.
What did you say?
He called it Subconscious Lee, and his name was Lee. So anyway, so you just got that, if you have that melody in your head. Here's Lee's head. Now a little slow. finished up with the one that Dizzy Gillespie wrote called Hot House. That was Hot House. You hear a lot of like jazz solos quoting that. I know I do. It's kind of infectious. So, let's see. So how much time do we have? I'm not really watching the clock.
You want to hit one more and then
Oh, one more?
do a birthday break?
Yeah, let's do one more, and then we'll mess with the festivities. Does anybody have any requests? No requests? Gershwin. Gershwin. I love Gershwin. Good. Let's see. And the question is, which Gershwin? How about?
Someone to watch over me.
We're gonna break the cake. And then you'll come back and play some more.
afternoon, and thank you for honoring Jesse's 100th birthday.
We're his daughters. I'm Kathleen, this is Jane.
And the library has always meant so very much to our family. Jesse started volunteering at the library before this program room was built. In the main room of the library itself, there was a piano. It was there that he started his decade-long traditions of improvising his original soundtrack to silent films. He would listen to it like once or twice at home just to get an idea, and then that was it, and he would just make it all up on the spot. He'd do it once or twice, and maybe once again at home. And he's leaving at the moment. It was there that okay, we already did that. He then did a series of jazz shows, bringing other terrific musicians, including Ed Pulser and Ken Poplowski, amongst many others. He was the band for our cooking shows, done with Jonathan Pratt. And then he played intro, outro music for many other events. And he showed up at a moment's notice. That's what we did with the cooking show. Jonathan Pratt went, it wouldn't be good if your dad was here. We brought him in and he was like a third person. I mean, he'd interrupt us and it was hilarious. It was the funniest thing about the show. And if a piano player is ever needed, somebody would call and he would show up if there was a musical emergency at the library. I want to thank today Ken Sargent. Bravo, thank you so much for this. And his wife Gwen for urging me to do this, along with a bunch of other people, and I finally called Jesse Bordeaux. I want to thank the Croton Arts and Humanities Advisory Council. That's quite a name, by the way. It's a mouthful. I want to thank Bob Albanese. On the way here, Jesse said, but I'm not playing, because he assumes he's playing here. I'm not, Kim, no, you're not playing. And then you started playing, you played a little bit, he goes, I'm not playing after him, he's too good. I also want to thank Gwen Glazer, Jesse Bordeaux, Mary Donnery again, and the famous and infamous Mary Burnell. Thank you for the memories, both past, present, and future. And my sister and I were talking, and we're so grateful to live so close to this wonderfully vibrant library, and for basically having such a fantastic piano for Jesse to play. It's a good one. So thank you. And one day, Mary Donnery picked it up, by the way. Upon it, it had fallen off the thing. And I told her, and she came in and